Chancellor is on his way. As he enters the hall, may I request Dr. S. Naran Roy, Director, Institute of Social Science, New Delhi, to come on the dais. Dr. Axel Ranit Sievers, to kindly come on stage. Ambassador Gautam Mukhopadhyay, former Indian Ambassador to Myanmar. Lieutenant General Retired Dr. Anil Kumar Mishra, Vice Chancellor, ICFA University. We will immediately proceed with the inaugural program. The chairman, Dr. S. Naran Roy, is Director of Institute of Social Sciences, New Delhi. He worked with Hindustan Times, English Daily from Delhi as Assistant Editor from 1990 to 2001. He has been involved in the Forum of Federations, Federalism projects in Yemen, Ethiopia, Mexico, and Nepal. In 2015, Dr. Roy was part of the international team to observe Sri Lanka's parliamentary elections. He has written and edited a number of books. His recent edited book is titled Development, Decentralization and Democracy, published by Orient Black Swan. Now, I pass on the entire inaugural session to Dr. S. Narayan Roy, Director, Institute of Social Science. Please take over.
Very good morning to all of you. Professor Liang Sela, Vice Chancellor, Ambassador Gautam Mukhopadhyay, Dr. Axel Harnett Sievers, Director, HBS India, Ms. Unmar Nunt, Program Coordinator, HBS Myanmar, distinguished invitees from Myanmar and Nepal, panelists and other participants from the rest of the country, and Dr. Robin. It is indeed a great privilege and honor for me to welcome you all to this important two-day international conference on Federalism, ethno-linguistic identities and minority rights, perspective from India and Myanmar. The Institute of Social Sciences, ISS New Delhi, Burma Center Delhi, and HBS India have together organized several such meetings involving various areas including democratization, civil society interface, media exposure, as well as the federal aspects of the evolving relationship between the two countries. Last year in October, we had a program in Yangon where we got another partner. In that case, it was HBS Myanmar. Last October, we were in this part of the country, in Shillong, and I think some of the participants, Kim Jong-un was there. We are very happy that this meeting is happening in Mizoram University. We are all very impressed by the lovely campus, and I'm sure under the leadership of the Vice Chancellor and the faculty, it's doing well and it will do much better. The various issues that we have discussed and we are going to discuss, because some of these issues are very cross-cutting, will be involving the peace process, connectivity, people-to-people ties, ethnic linguistic issues, minority and all that. I must say that in our journey together, we have seen the first mile. This conference hopefully will make an extra mile. Let me say a few words about some of the key issues, including federalism. Why federalism? federalism is used both in boastful and scornful tone, depending on who wants to say what. To some, it is an organizing principle that keeps heterogeneous segments of our society together. To others, federalism is a recipe, possibly for disaster, including there are fears in sections that it may lead to secessionism. Let me say very clearly that federalism is an idea whose time has come. It is today an international flavor. But federalism is not cast in stone. It grows differently on different soils. And hence we are having discussion on federalism. The Indian federal model and the German are not necessarily the same. For that matter, the Canadian and American are also not the same. And that is the beauty of it. That while you have some of the common features, whether it is about respect for unity and diversity, whether it is self-rule as well as shared rule, you have some of these common issues. At the same time, there are innovative experiments being done, and some countries are trying, which others in the present context are trying to kind of adapt to their conditions, not necessarily follow or imitate. Today, 40% of the people in the world live under federal governments. And we are very happy that the youngest federal country, Nepal, has a representation here. Dr. Surya Dhumbar has also come to join us. Why federalism? Because its appeal stems from the values that brings out. It also allows citizens to deal with their diversities. Minorities can evolve their own identities. And these are some of the strengths. But let me very, very clearly say at this stage that federalism is not the only answer. It is certainly not the exclusive answer. There are other ways in which some of the issues can be dealt with. But the advantage of federalism is for countries like ours, both Myanmar and India and Nepal, which are very diverse ethnically, culturally, religiously, linguistically, and otherwise, even in terms of socioeconomic aspirations of the people. But federalism requires institutional architecture. You talk to our friend from Nepal, they will say how, even after 2 years after adopting the federal constitution, they are still in the process of creating those institutions. So the architecture of federalism is important. But no less important is the institutional gardening. You have to nurse it so that federalism will prosper. And another point which is very important as far as federalism is concerned, that there is a lot to learn from the experiences of other countries. I would like to very briefly bring to your attention the 4 variables that one sees globally when it comes to federal practices in terms of national unity. On the one hand, imagine you have a very strong federal state, but it is accommodating towards these aspirations. And what happens? The result is short-term threat, but long-term decrease in the threat. You have the example of India as well as Canada. Canada faced the secessionist problem. India faced a lot of challenges from the subnational groups in this part of the country, and it does, occasionally face from here and there. But because it is accommodative, because it has adopted the federal principle, it has been possible to deal with these issues much better than others. So that is the advantage of federalism. See another model. You have this strong federal state, but unaccommodating. Now it will lead to continuing secessionist threat, even breakup. See what happened to the USSR, to Yugoslavia. But let me also make a point that Yugoslavia and USSR were no real federalism, because federalism without democracy is no federalism. The third variable is that you may have weak federal state, but very accommodating. Now, if you are like that, then the result will be possibly peaceful breakup or even velvet divorce. But finally, if you have the weak federal state and unaccommodating, that again you have the scenario of constant trouble and all that. So I think this was important to explain about the federal practice as far as our friends from Myanmar are concerned. A few words about ethno-linguistic identities. Europe's experience with nation formation is that the principal basis of national unity has been language. Even the names of large number of European countries will be primarily linguistic in nature. See, Portugal for Portuguese, then Spain, France, Germany, England, Russia, Romania. Polyglot empires like Austro-Hungarian and Ottoman were superseded primarily by the language-based nations like Greece, Turkey, Germany, Italy, etc. Multiplicity of language in the European context is considered a danger to unity. Now the Indian model is just the opposite. Here the multiplicity of language, diversity, is supposed to be the asset. And I can say that we have all along been talking about unity in diversity. I will go a step further and say diversity itself is unity. And that has been the beauty of this country, where you are still struggling, and yet you have been able to create a federal model where respect for diversity has been the reason why you are together today. Ethnic federalism is quite often a very attractive one in terms of various parts of the world, including Nepal, including Northeast. In the Indian case, there have been two stages of federalization. In the initial stage, that diversity and democratic aspirations were the main thing, as also the ethnic linguistic cases. But the second stage of federalization happened exclusively in Northeast. You know how many states were created and all that. And I think that is some model that our friends from Myanmar will find it useful. Finally, I will talk a little bit about minority rights. You see, Roosevelt said that no democracy can long survive unless there is a recognition of rights of minorities. The underlying message of the Indian freedom struggle under Gandhiji was that no community owns the nation. It belongs to all. In fact, he goes to the extent of arguing that no group is privileged enough, even if it happens to be the majority, and the minority group will be protected against majoritarian agenda. And that was the kind of underlying message of the freedom struggle. And yet, when you see the Constitution of India, minority has not been defined. In fact, only on 4 occasions the term minority have been used. Internationally also, minority rights have been, talked about globally and respected. So I think it's very timely that we are here to also discuss about minority rights. And finally, let me say that the task before the democratic governments, whether it is India, Nepal, or Myanmar, would be to ensure that it creates the living space. It's not just, administrative tool. Federalism creates living space where people, community, groups can live together. So that should be the objective. As far as Myanmar is concerned, it is going through what could be called geography of anger. Arjun Appadurai, a great scholar, has made a very interesting point which is very relevant here. He talks of twin challenges. One is predatory identities. Quite often the predatory identities is the majoritarian identities. Now this is one thing. On the other hand, the fear of the small number. So I think this is very relevant when we have a discourse on federalism. Finally, federalism is a 100-meter sprint. No, it is not. it is a marathon. And hence, you have challenges, you have many new opportunities. If you miss out, then you miss the train. So, federalism is an exercise in line drawing. Through those line drawing, you decide which function to be performed by whom? Central government, state government, or in today's case, local government. So that is one thing. It's also like a musical compilation, or rather a composition. So federalism exists in time, but it unfolds over time. Thank you very much. Let me now invite Dr. Axel Hernet-Sievers, Director HBS India, to say a few words.
Thank you. Good morning. Vice Chancellor Professor Lianzilla, Vice Chancellor Dr. Mishra, Ambassador Dr. Ashnarayan Roy, or just Ash for me, thank you very much for this beautiful introduction, beautiful first notes on federalism this morning. I want to welcome everybody here to our conference on ethnic-linguistic identities and federalism as part of our India-Myanmar dialogue. I want to welcome you specifically in the name of the Heinrich Böll Foundation, the Green Political Foundation from Germany, whose India office director I am, and who I think there's a certain need for some explanations why we as a German organization would be supporting this India-Myanmar dialogue process, and why we are particularly interested in strengthening the linkages, strengthening the connections and the dialogue between specifically Northeast India and Myanmar. So let me talk a little bit about this. I will not go into a foundational attempt to talk about the fundamentals of federalism. At this point, I think Ashnarayan gave us a very, very good introduction to some of the core themes. So let me say a few words about Heinrich Böll Foundation, and then come to the topic. Heinrich Böll Foundation, we are the Green Political Foundation from Germany. We are linked to the Greens, which is one of the parties represented in federal parliament, and which is actually, while it is on the federal level in Germany right now in the opposition, it is part of the Green Party is part of governing coalitions in 11 out of 16 states of Germany. Germany is a federal system, obviously, as well, and so the Greens within this system, even though they're overall a rather minor political party, play a quite substantial role by being part of mostly the junior partner in governing coalitions in about nearly 2/3 of all the states we have in Germany. So a political foundation like we are not part of the party, but we are guided by similar principles. We follow certain green outlook on the world, if I may say it like this. A political foundation has the role to act as a dialogue and networking agency on green issues, and which also is supporting projects, dialogue projects, conferences like this. And so this is part of our role. We are publicly funded. We have, just to be very frank about this, we are getting the funds for our activities in India, in Myanmar, in the entire Asian, African, Latin American region from funds of the German Development Corporation, where there are certain budget lines that are meant to develop civic education in the broadest sense. So, we as HBF here in India, as Heinrich Böll Foundation here in India, are here since 2002, and we pursue a number of themes which we think are green in the wider sense. It's not just environmental policy and climate policy, but other core issues of our activities involve gender equality and support for democratic participation. And we have a strong focus within our work on the Indian Northeast from several angles. For example, we have been working for a number of years together with Zuban, Ovashi Butalia, and or the Center for Northeastern Studies on issues which were always on the borderline between politics and culture of Northeast India, addressing issues of democracy and conflict within the region, but also trying to build dialogue between what is so often called Northeastern India versus the mainland India. So I personally, when I'm asked why are you as a German organization really focusing so much on the Northeast, I would say, I usually say Northeast India is an area which is sometimes a bit peripheral in various ways to India, and it shows the possibilities and also the limitations of the Indian federal system to integrate diversity. I think that's it's worth thinking about this for a minute. I think India, being such a diverse country as it is, has been very much a success story in terms of integrating diversity, ethnic diversity, political, religious diversity overall. But there are certain parts of the country which have constantly challenged the capacity for integration. And I think here in the Northeast we have a number of cases which really show that very clearly. Some long-term conflicts dragging on, but also always attempts to capture this, to accommodate those concerns, to end conflicts within federal structures. I think Mizoram particularly is a good example how a relatively small ethno-linguistic group with a strong regional or with a strong ethno-linguistic identity has been able to create a sphere of autonomy within a federal structure that has, in many ways, I think all sides would regard as a win-win situation. It has not always worked as well in all parts of the Northeast. Of course, I think we are all aware about this. For me, I'm not the first time here in Mizoram today. It's actually, I think, my third visit. We have been involved in activities specifically here in Mizoram over the years for a number of times, in a number of ways since 3-4 years, and I'm always stunned by the very interesting mix of Mizoram having a very clearly identifiable identity, pursuing its own way of doing things, while at the same time being unquestionably a part of India with lots of relations to the center, with lots of, particularly of course, young Mizo people of Mizo regions, studying, working all over India, being very present in all parts of the country. So I think that's a federalist success story, at least from my point of view, a very positive one. I know there are discontents and difficulties, of course, we are all aware of this, but it's a remarkable story after such a long story of conflict that Mizoram has seen. Which brings me to the other point, or the second point I wanted to mention, especially the role of the India-Myanmar dimension in this dialogue. Of course, we all know Myanmar is in a political transition process, the reform is going on. A few years ago, I think it was virtually impossible to talk about federalism as an option for Myanmar. This has changed. Federalism is not anymore seen by many actors in Myanmar today as a threat, but actually as a potential solution to it's not anymore seen as a threat through stability and unity of the country anymore, but rather as an option for bringing about stability, of growing, of moving forward. I look at this as a very, very positive process, and I'm happy that we have the possibility here now to start a dialogue about actual experiences with federal systems, or with the federal system, the Indian federal system, of providing examples of how it is possible to create federal autonomous space for ethno-linguistic minorities. And of course this dialogue is informed by the question, is there anything that perhaps the Indian experience and reflections on the Indian experience can be made useful for debates in Myanmar? But perhaps also vice versa. This should of course not be a one-way road. This dialogue is part of a longer engagement of India-Myanmar dialogue on different issues, where we have worked to some extent on the level of central politics, but have always had this particular focus of relations between Northeast India and Myanmar. So what we are planning here with this conference is an attempt to create a useful exchange, not so much about, let me say, practical connectivity this time, which I know is still a big challenge and which we are all hoping to increase and improve about, but let me say intellectual connectivity, intellectual debate, and perhaps the development of certain perspectives, policy propositions, which can help to bring the process of developing a truly participatory, I expect, federal structure forward in Myanmar, while perhaps getting some experiences, some learning from the Indian side. Having said that, I don't want to take the whole space here for Heinrich Böll Foundation. My colleague Alison from HBF Myanmar office is following me and continuing to say a few words to you about from their perspective. Alison, thanks.
Good morning, everyone. I am from Heinrich Böll Myanmar office. As a representative from HBS Myanmar, firstly, I would like to start by thanking the respective institutes and organizations, Institute of Social Science, Mizoram University, Burma Center, Delhi, and HBS India, who took part and co-organized to let this event happen. Also, I would like to extend my warm welcome to all the participants from various organizations in relevant countries for joining this conference. As you may all know, Myanmar is also struggling towards the path to federalism through several times of peace process. The first meeting of 21st Century Peace Conference was held in Myanmar in 2016, and second conference will be on the way, will coming soon. However, the further debates and discussions with various ethnic groups on the ideology and framework for the new formation of democratic federalism is still ongoing. Apparently, this is a good time to exchange the perspective on federalism within the region, as Mizoram is one of the federal unions of India. So we will have the chance to experience on the past and present situation of its federal system, including the perspective of the ethnic identity in federalism. Because Myanmar is a country with a multi-ethnic, multi-religious, multilingual, and multi-culture. And also, the country is facing with several challenges on natural resource governance and environmental issues, along with the development. So it's not only helpful, but also valuable for us to exchange the challenges and opportunity on these issues. Once again, welcome all of you, and I hope that all of you enjoy this two-day conference. And on behalf of Myanmar delegation, I would like to show our sincere appreciation for your interest on our country. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. May I now invite Ambassador Gautam Mukhopadhyay for the keynote address. Ambassador Mukhopadhyay has served in many countries, including Mexico, France, Cuba, and I happen to know him when he was doing his first posting in Mexico. But I must say that he has had the distinction of serving in some of the most difficult countries. To give you the example, when the Taliban collapsed, when he was made ambassador and asked to reopen the Indian embassy in Afghanistan. Then he also served in Syria, of course, in Myanmar when the transition was happening and all that, besides being a visiting professor at the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace. So may I have the pleasure to invite Ambassador Mukhopadhyay for the keynote address.
Thank you, Ash, for that introduction. Good morning, Chebaye, Minglaba. I would like to thank the Burma Center, the Institute for Social Sciences, the Heinrich Boll Stiftung, for the opportunity to address this conference for a change in the Northeast instead of one of the metropolis, and also for a change at a university amidst young, lively minds. I would particularly like to thank Mizoram University and its Vice-Chancellor, Professor Pu Lianzela and Dr. Robin Cooley for their warm hospitality and for all the arrangements made for this event. And finally, let me also wish a very warm welcome to our foreign participants, especially my Myanmar friends, here with gratitude for the 3 wonderful years that I spent there. Initially thinking that it would be a largely local audience, I thought I would speak on the democratic transition and the peace process as perhaps the 2 of the most topical issues, that Indians as a whole are interested in. But yesterday, in an informal introduction, I understood from the organizers that in the interest of the foreign participants as well, I might say a few words on our own experience of accommodating ethnic aspirations and how India-Myanmar relations could in some way contribute or is contributing, or maybe is not contributing to that. So please forgive me if I've had to shorten my original statement and try and include a section on India. So if my presentation is not entirely, all the I's are not dotted and T's are not crossed and it's a little disjointed, I apologize beforehand. So let me start with the democratic transition. It is tempting to actually begin with the fascinating question of the roots, trajectory and possible future of democracy in India and Myanmar. But in the interest of time, I will eschew that and just make 4 points. First, by any political yardstick, the November 2015 elections and the swearing in of the new government in March 2016 will stand as one of the most momentous periods in Myanmar's history. The elections were the first open, multi-party, reasonably free elections held in over 50 years, and its outcome was the replacement of a military-backed regime that actually culminated years of direct military rule into a civilian government led by by Daw Aung San Suu Kyi and the NLD, which had been in the forefront for the struggle for democracy since at least 1988, when the student agitation was launched. The elections were very much a vindication of Daw Aung San Suu Kyi's immense popularity in leadership, as well as the desire of the Myanmar people for a change after decades of rather harsh and mostly mismanaged military rule. There was also widespread feeling that with the lady at the helm, things would improve and Myanmar would become a normal country fully integrated into the international community. This much is known, but I'd like to highlight that there is little question that the transition was also one of the most impressive and affirmative political stories of the year, in sharp contrast to what many perceive to be setbacks to democracy in the hands of right-wing populists in many other parts of the democratic world, turning democracy, which was seen as the most progressive and inherently liberal and inclusive political order, into something that's turned inwards, majoritarian, and exclusive. And even when it does look outward, tends to look at a chauvinistic reflection of itself. For this great achievement, I think both the democratic forces as well as the ruling establishment at that time deserve credit. But successful as it was, the electoral victory was not a complete victory for democracy. First, the 2008 Myanmar military drafted constitution was designed to maintain the Dharma Project, that is the Myanmar armed forces, complete hold on power, or at least, and hold on power at least to safeguard the unity, integrity, and stability of the country until the military themselves felt ready to hand over power. They retained 25% of seats in the parliament by appointment, not by election. They held a virtual veto power of any amendment to the constitution by a requirement that any amendment should be passed by at least 75% of the parliament, and of course 25% was entirely in their hands. And third, by the voting system, they could be ensured or guaranteed at least one of the two posts of the vice president. In addition, they had complete jurisdiction, exclusive jurisdiction over internal and external security by its control over three key ministries in the government: defense, home, and border areas, who were serving military officers who reported directly to the Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces. It also has far-reaching emergency powers that it can exercise through the National Defense and Security Council, where it holds a 6-5 majority, despite President U Tin Cho at its head and Daw Aung San Suu Kyi as foreign minister as a member. Third, the new NLD government faced heightened expectations, perhaps unrealistic, and a whole series of challenges on assuming power. The first were those that were inherently built into the constitution. I mentioned the stranglehold of the military, but also Article 59F of the constitution barred Daw Suu Kyi herself from the post of the presidency by a criterion that required that no president or vice president or senior high official should have any family links with anyone holding a foreign passport. And as you know, she was married to a British national, and her children hold foreign passports even after her husband died. Third, they had no locus standi on issues of security, which includes the peace process and the Rohingya issue. And lastly, not lastly, the 2008 constitution was highly centralized and did not or does not meet the demands of the ethnic minorities for equality, cultural rights, and greater sharing of power, resources, and revenue between the union government and the constituent regions in a more federal arrangement. Finally, there were a whole issues relating to governance and administration. They include the fact that the General Administration Department comes under the Home Ministry, which reports to a serving military officer, who in turn reports to the Commander-in-Chief. There was the issue of the competence and lack of experience of many of the cabinet ministers, partly because simply they had no experience of democracy all this while. The centralized authority in the NLD in the person of Daw Aung San Suu Kyi, the lack of an anointed second line of leadership that the party and administration can turn to, and, as I mentioned before, the structure of governance in which effectively the civilian administration itself is staffed by a lot of ex-military officers or officers who have been groomed under military rule. So on the one hand, you have a democratic majority in the parliament, but when it comes to implementing the laws that are passed in parliament, they are still dependent on a cadre of administrators that go back to the ancien regime. This is particularly so in the provinces. This is compounded further by a number of changes that the outgoing USDP government brought into the structure of the administration by appointing permanent secretaries in the last few months of its tenure. A number of substantive decisions that were taken by the outgoing government that the new government had to live with, including a fairly drastic cut in its budget. And but even where it could have exercised its discretion in favor of greater, let's say, devolution or delegation of powers, the NLD did not. For example, after it won the elections, it could have appointed people from, or political leaders from ethnic regions as the chief ministers, or even from the ethnic parties that actually won the elections in some of the states, as they are called. The ethnic states are called states. The Burma-dominated provinces are called regions. But even when she could have done that, she preferred to rely on the centralized system of appointment of chief ministers from the center. Having said all this, I have to say that Daw Aung San Suu Kyi's handling of these challenges have been, by and large, adroit and pragmatic. First, when she found that the military was not willing to accommodate her stated desire to lead the country as the president, she very smartly and quickly appointed a close loyalist, President U Tin Cho, as the president. And through another provision in the constitution, which allows appointment by the parliament, in case the parliament feels it is required, appointed herself as state councillor. In addition, she retained the post of a minister in the president's office, so had the ability to advise the president directly and formally, and also the foreign minister. So in effect, de facto, she remains the leader running the country, in spite of the fact that the constitution does not allow her to be the president. But in other areas, particularly in the areas of security, she chose not to rock the government. She did not challenge the authority of the government on security issues. She refrained from criticizing the military when it came to their offensives against the ethnic armed insurgents, avoided confrontation in the National Defense and Security Council, and also in the areas of administration, partly because of her great authority. She has retained the loyalty of, by and large, most of the bureaucrats, and she has helped develop a second line of leadership amongst some of the chief ministers in particular. But this has been at the cost of an ability to act on all fronts, and we can see that there are areas, for example, like the economy, which are probably as important as the issue that she has prioritized most, which is the peace process, where in fact the government could have brought short-term results where it has suffered. I'll now turn to the ethnic insurgencies. Once again, it is tempting to go into the history and differences between the ethnic insurgencies in India and Myanmar, but again I'll make a few short points. The main point of difference is the scale. The proportion of the country and the proportion of the population who are effectively under the ethnic communities in Myanmar is far greater than India, and correspondingly the problem is far greater, and it has defied solutions ever since its independence in 1948. The second is that, on the whole, she inherited a very positive balance from the USD government on the peace process, which had led a peace process starting from about 2011-12 for about 3-4 years, and in October 2015 had actually signed what was called a nationwide ceasefire agreement, bringing together 15 ethnic armed groups with whom they had separate bilateral ceasefires into one umbrella, and negotiated a text for a ceasefire and the political dialogue that was initialed by all 15 parties. In the end, not all 15 parties signed the document. Only 8 parties signed the document. 7 parties did not sign the document. But the outgoing government also set in motion the mechanisms and the process to continue that process. Now, when Daw Suu Kyi came to power, she gave the peace process the highest priority. In fact, it was the first thing that she addressed and turned her attention to. And as Alison mentioned, she organized in August last year the first, what was called the 21st Century Pangalong Conference. This is a reference to the 1947 Pangalong Conference convened by her father. in which she managed to get the participation of both the 8 signatories and the 7 non-signatories. However, she could not get the participation of 3 other groups that have never signed a bilateral ceasefire and were not part of the nationwide ceasefire, negotiating process. And in fact, there lies a problem. The peace process finally floundered. A second round of the Panglong Conference, was the 21st Century Panglong Conference, was supposed to be held in February. That has been delayed. And basically there are 3 issues, or 3 or 4 issues that have really prevented it. One is that on the conditions, the terms and conditions for the participation of the non-signatories and also those who have never signed any bilateral ceasefire agreements. For the non-signatories, there is an insistence that they sign the NCA, or the ceasefire agreement first. For the non-signatories, they want a kind of, they would like them to renounce the armed struggle or at least sequester their arms. Now, neither the non-signatories nor those who have never signed any bilateral agreement are agreeable to that. The second is the commitment of the Tamado, or suspicions about the commitment of the Tamado to a federal structure, enshrining equality of status and dignity to all ethnic units, substantive cultural and administrative autonomy, and more equitable sharing of power, resources and revenue, and the status and role of the ethnic armed cadres in the armed forces. And third is the fact that a rash of conflicts have in the meanwhile broken out, particularly in those areas in the north of the country, or those allied to those insurgent groups in the north of the country, which are close to China. This includes a group that's headed by the KIA, but increasingly the WA, the United Wa State Army, is taking an important role. They included these 2 groups as well as 2 other groups who have now formed a northern alliance. So while on the one hand the army has stepped up its offensives against some of the ethnic armed groups in order to get tactical or perhaps even strategic advantage, the ethnic armed groups themselves have also stepped up their attacks against army centers. And this is the background behind which there's a delay in the meantime, the WAs have also tried to take away the leadership of the negotiation process by convening their own conference, and the Chinese too have been involved in trying to broker something a little bit in the background in Kunming. But then there is the whole issue of the role of China. China's role is very complicated. On the one hand, many of these insurgent groups are highly dependent for arms as well as shelter and perhaps even funding from China. On the other hand, China at times has nudged them towards a kind of negotiating process, and at many other times played with them in the interest of its economic, in its economic and strategic interests, which are vast. They include mining interests, hydropower interests, and possibly access to the Bay of Bengal as well. The problem here is that in fact, China's kind of policy on this is governed by 4 parties. One is the government. The second is the International Liaison Department of the Chinese Communist Party. The third is the PLA. And the fourth is the Yunnan regional government. So China's role in this is extremely complex. So I will now actually then turn to what India can or has been doing. So far, India has not been a very active participant in the peace process, though India was invited as one of a very small handful of participants to witness the national ceasefire agreement as an international observer, together with the UN, China, Thailand, and at the last minute, the European Union and Japan. And at this signing ceremony, representatives from Mizoram, Manipur, and Nagaland were also present. I think I've missed out a page somewhere, but anyway. The second is now India's contribution has been largely in a different direction. We have spent a large amount of money in trying to connect the Northeast with Myanmar. The major project in this, which I think people in Mizoram are very familiar with, is the Kaladam Project, whose sole purpose is to provide the northeast of India an access to the sea just in case it is not available through Myanmar, and not be dependent on the long land route through the vulnerable Chickens Neck. The second is the Trilateral Highway, which intends to connect the northeast of India all the way to Thailand, and through Thailand to the rest of ASEAN. Both these projects will take at least about 3 or 4 years to fructify. But more specifically on cross-border initiatives, the Government of India has taken a 25 million 5-year initiative to fund small border area projects on the Myanmar side of the border, particularly in the Naga regions and in the Chin Hills. And these mainly go for schools, hospitals, primary health centers, and so on. And this program is developing quite well. It's also doing a lot of roads connecting Ritilim as well as More, Tamu, and so on, which help all the ethnic communities on both sides. And there have been a number of cultural initiatives. When I was ambassador there, I took the initiative to bring at least 3 or 4 of the Myanmar chief ministers, the chief minister of Kachin state, the chief minister of Sagaing region, which is also the area where the Nagas are, the chief minister of the Chin state, to various cultural festivals, the Sangai festival, the Hornbill festival. In fact, I introduced the chief ministers of Kachin state and Sagaing region to the prime minister at the Hornbill festival in 2015. And one of the things and similarly, there have been an interest on the part of the chief ministers on this side. Almost all of them have made at least one visit, unofficially or informally, including the Honorable Chief Minister of Mizoram, to Myanmar. But one of the things that I wanted to mention, which has a specific relevance to this issue of federalism, is that when they came here, they were able to see how the ethnic communities of India were enjoying a degree of cultural autonomy and self-determination, where their chief ministers were genuinely elected by the people themselves, by the use of the languages in daily discourse and in official communications, and so on. And one of the lessons that they took home, because of this tussle between a union government and the ethnic sort of desire for federalism, was this whole idea of a unitary state with federal characteristics. And they were particularly interested in the institution of the governor as a representative of the center. And in the internal conversations, this is something that I found them discussing. So there are a whole series of areas where India can help Myanmar in these issues of center-state relations, resource sharing, devolution of power, delegation, the 6th schedule and what have you, which have so far not yet been plugged. And part of the problem is that there's been a lack of initiative from the Myanmar side. There's also been a lack of initiative from the Indian side, both from the ethnic states, the northeastern states, as well as from the center. And I think this is something that if we could, as a result of this conference, try to promote, it would be a great idea. Finally, a little bit about India's experience of federalism. I think one of the great insights of Gandhiji at the time of the independence movement, which people don't often know and don't often remark on, is his use of the native languages, of the vernaculars, in bringing about greater awareness and acceptability and participation of Indians from all walks of life in the national movement. Later on, this led to the linguistic division of states. And at a third stage, it led to the 7 states, and later 7 states and 1 brother, which was separate actually, of the Northeast. So what we have is, we have the whole idea of linguistic states, which are basically based on ethno-linguistic criteria in the Northeast. Now this has worked in different ways at different places. The great bargain under which many of the insurgencies were brought into the mainstream was a kind of grand bargain, in which on the one hand the insurgencies gave up the armed struggle. On the other hand, the central government gave them a great measure of self-determination and autonomy, and basically one is self-determination in terms of language. The second is central funding, and the third was job reservations. And in the process, the northeastern states were able to preserve a large measure of both autonomy in their own development as well as cultural autonomy. Now, this has worked differently in different states. I think one of the best examples is Mizoram, where you see a kind of state that is very cohesive, in spite of the fact that there are Mizos that are outside the state. There is no desire to aggrandize and consolidate this into a state or into a nation. There's an acceptance of the reality as it is. But at the same time, there is possibly the best use of central funding for development of the state, raising standards of living. Now, this is different in other states. I think one could say that more or less the same is true for Sikkim and Tripura. In Nagaland, they have been very successful in this aspect of self-determination, in bringing about a Naga consciousness, in spite of the fact that unlike the Mizos, there was no common language amongst the Nagas. But in some ways, this has spilled over into claims and demands over other states. That has created frictions with other states and also frictions within states like Manipur. Perhaps Arunachal was a different solution. Arunachal was a solution more in the direction of integration, including a degree of cultural integration. And Manipur was probably the state that felt trapped in, it was neither wholly an ethno-linguistic state, so it did not have that kind of cohesiveness, as a result of which there are three basically contending parties, the Kukis, the Nagas, and the Meiteis. And I think you all know the problems that still beset Manipur, in spite of the fact that in some ways it is one of the culturally most rich states of the northeast of India. So I think, this is broadly what I had to say about the democratic transition and about the peace process, and also about how India has handled ethnic aspirations. Naturally, there's a lot of lessons to be learned both ways. I cannot say that the Indian example is perfect. In fact, it's far from perfect. There are problems still going on. Some of them have to do with consolidation of ethnic identity. But as Dr. Axel mentioned earlier, there is a lot that is successful, and there is a lot that would be extremely relevant to Myanmar. Thank you. And if I've exceeded my time, my apologies.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Mukhopadhyay, for giving us an excellent keynote presentation. I think it has helped us to kind of, set parameters for the two-day session. May I now have the privilege to invite Professor Dhyan Soel, Honorable Vice Chancellor, Mizoram University.
Eminent people here in the dais, the chairman of this function, Dr. R. Naren Roy, and Dr. Axel, who delivered his very interesting welcome address, and Onmar Naund, and Gautam Mukhopadhyay, and Dr. Robin, and people are coming from outside of Mizoram, and my colleagues here in the university, teaching and non-teaching colleagues, and distinguished invitees, ladies and gentlemen. It's my proud privilege to stand before you here in this auspicious occasion when we have international conference on a very relevant topic, but I feel myself very inadequate because the theme of the seminar, as regards to my knowledge about this theme is very shallow and very deficient, I should say. Anyway, those that have been already delivered are very informative and very interesting. And I know in the deliberations that are yet to come, that will really enlighten us, the participants, as well as those who are having the privilege to listen to in the next technical session and all. First of all, I'd like to welcome those of eminent people who are coming from outside. Welcome to this Mizoram, which is often referred to as the land of charm or the land of enchanting hills. I want you to enjoy these beautiful hills. The people here in Mizoram state, they are hospitable, they are friendly, and they have rich cultures. Enjoy your stay here. And Mizoram is also often cited as one of the most peaceful states here in India and the most peaceful state in Northeast. Some of you might have known very well about the history of insurgency we had here. For long 20 years, we experienced insurgency. That was between 1966 to 1986. 20 long years of insurgency. And see, when the disturbance broke out, I was a high school student. For no fault of mine, I was arrested, accusing me as violating the curfew, night curfew, because we were inside the house, but you know, when some rifles or army people accuse you, you cannot say anything. So they put me in the quarter guard in the dark room for one night. Next day, those influential people came and pleaded for me, like, he was a student, he is not involved in underground activities. Then I was released with my friends. And then another occasion was, like, I visited my home village on an important function. At that time I was inside, and military patrolling, they came, they took me out, they beat me black and blue. That was like, you know, that kind of treatment we got during disturbance and all. But fortunately, peace agreement was signed in 1986, and since that time, Mizoram was often cited as the most peaceful state. And for peace, you know, the cost is very costly. The price is very high. I could mention so many things, but one of the very interesting things that I would like to tell the people from outside, like, for the cause of peace, the elected chief minister of Mizoram, the then chief minister at that time, he vacated his seat, chief minister's seat, for the rebel leader. And this is one of the big reasons why peace agreement could be signed, this thing. There are other sacrifices made, but for other states that are still under insurgency and this thing, if the Mizoram example can be, like, you know, followed, like those people, elected people, like if they can vacate their seat for peace, then I think that would bring a very good outcome. Anyway, let that be enough for introducing Mizoram. I would like to also introduce a bit about Mizoram University, because there are some of you who came here for the first time. This Mizoram University is a central university which started functioning since 2001. So today we are now in 2017, so it's still a young university. And fortunately, for the first NAC accreditation, we are given A grade university. And when the State Pollution Control Board audited this university, green audit was done, and it was given also A grade. and we are fortunate for that. And you might have already known about our position in NIRF ranking, national level ranking of all the higher institutions. Of all the institutions, more than 3,000 plus institutions here in the country, our position is 94. We are among the top 100. And when you take only the universities, out of the 700 plus universities here that came for national ranking, and our position is 58. Though young, we could reach this kind of rank, and we are very happy to be in that position. And in the years to come, next year, we feel that we would be in a better rank still, because all of the teachers and non-teaching, we work together cooperatively, and we believe in teamwork. Okay, and this university has an area of 970 acres, 970 acres only. And we have one constituent college, which is Pachonga University College. It has 700 acres land. Okay, so the combined two mean 970 plus 700, you know, the area that the university has. And there are 8 schools of studies, 8 different schools of studies, and 33 departments offering PG courses, UG course, MPhil and PhD courses here. We have 27 affiliated colleges plus 1 constituent college. And we are proud to have a very good central library, one of the best in the whole eastern region in the country, because that was the NAP team. When they visited, they said it is one of the best in the whole eastern region in the country. And this campus is eco-friendly campus. We believe in harnessing solar energy, and also rainwater harvesting had been done successfully. And this campus has a botanical garden of 7 hectares, greenhouses, fruit, herbal garden, all these things. And we also have 2 helipads. So when Dr. X and those other, when you come again, you can utilize our helipad by hiring helicopters that can land here. And we have Women's Study Center, Biotech Hub, Bioinformatics Center, so on and so forth. Our aim is academic excellence. We want to attract foreign students from Myanmar and from other parts of the world. And the motto is, greater deeds remain. We have achieved quite a lot during the past 17 years or so, but we believe there are some greater deeds that are yet to be achieved still. Okay, let that be enough for the introduction, small introduction of our university. Coming to the theme of this international conference, to my understanding, there are 2 conflicting things in the world. Number one is, like, we are in a globalized era. We talk about globalization. In globalization, what we see is, in the corporate world, perform or perish. If you cannot come up to the standard, if you cannot perform, you perish. It amounts to survival of the fittest. Survival of the fittest. Okay? When you cannot come up to the global level, in production, in economy, or in education, or in whatever venture that you have, if you cannot come up, you perish. Okay? Survival of the fittest. So the whole globe has been, like, regarded as global village. So through information, through technology, like, this development is very rapid. And at the same time, like, there is a need for protection of minorities, protection of the interests of ethnic groups and minority and all these things. But when globalization leads to a kind of assimilation, a kind of exploitation, unless and until you have a good governance that will take care of the interests and the need of the people wherever they may be. They may be in Myanmar, they may be in Mizoram, or they may be in India. So unless this globalization force had been adjusted through good governance, taking the interests of the minority of the people, minority interests, then you are nowhere. Okay, so here lies the need of having good government or good governance. Okay, time and again, the United Nations, they are talking about sustainable development. Sustainable development, okay? So they even had 17 sustainable development goals, which include promote just, peaceful, and inclusive societies. Okay. Even though globalization may try to kind of, put down those minorities' interests or things like that, unless they are properly protected or legally protected. Okay. But United Nations concern is promote just, peaceful, and inclusive societies. We have to recognize them. Okay. And then another is promote inclusive and sustainable economic growth, employment, and decent work for all, even for the minority, irrespective of their groups or irrespective of the languages or the dialect they are using. Okay, so here lies the importance of good governance and this thing. So in India, we believe in unity in diversity. India has to integrate the interests of all the regions, the interests of all the ethnic people. Then democracy, as of now, is very useful, but there are challenges also, and then the present democratic form of government has to also go further to protect the interests of the minority people living here in India. And in the Northeast also, we have the hill tribal people, and then the plain tribal people, and then plain, if we kind of see the community here in the Northeast, broadly, there are three. Tribal people in the hills, tribal people in the plain, and then non-tribal and all. So, they kind of believe in different religion, different faiths they have, they profess. So their interest has to be protected and all. So when we deliberate the thing, let us see the real situation. Okay. Here in Mizoram, our next neighbor is Myanmar and this thing. There are two interesting things for your information. For good or for bad, legally or illegally, people from Myanmar, they come and settle here. Okay. When our youth, Mizo youth, they say, no work, no employment. Okay. When they sit with folding their arms and this thing, educated, unemployed, these people, we don't have a job here, the government cannot offer us this. Okay. But at the same time, for the people, our fellow Mizos, who settled or who come from Myanmar, they say, Mizoram is full of opportunity because they're ready to get lower wage, lower salary. So the taxi drivers, domestic workers, or this thing, okay? Those who do the manual work. Majority maybe, if we do the estimation or if we sincerely enumerate those people, so people will be mainly from Myanmar and this thing, okay? So that is the thing. Anyway, peaceful coexistence is there. And one good thing about Mizo people is that we have like different ethnic groups, different dialects and this thing, but we have one common lingua franca, Mizo, that binds us together, So that may be the need in Myanmar also, the need in some other places also. So in any case, let me not prolong my speech that way, but like we have to kind of settle the thing, like globalization seems to do something, and at another side also we have to protect the interests of the minority group, the ethnic group, or those other small tribes, other small religion, so that, there can be a sustainable development. When we talk about sustainability, the world fit for future generation, the so-called development you have, the so-called globalization, like if it uprooted all the distinct cultures you have, okay, all those things that, like for your identification you need, that should not be there. So it has to be protected, and for that, the need of good government is more urgent and more demanding also. With these few words, I inaugurate the international seminar, and I declare the international seminar open. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Lian Sela, for your excellent address. We were very happy to know that in such a short span of time, the university has done so well, and that speaks of the leadership as well as faculty. May I now invite Dr. A.K. Mishra. He is Vice Chancellor of ICAI University, to give us a short message because we are getting a little late.
Honorable Vice Chancellor Pu Yenzela, the chief guest of this function, Ambassador Gautam Mukhopadhyay, and Ashish Narayan, the director of the Institute of Social Sciences, and our friends who have come from Myanmar, and also the director, Dr. Axel. In fact, I've been surprised because I was not prepared that I'll be called upon to speak in this inaugural session. But I feel honored, first having been invited and then given this chance to speak to this great audience. So thank you so very much. It's a very impromptu thing, and being from the military and now foray into the academia, I'll just share what has happened, say, military history part of it, of this region, because that has undercurrent and also overlay in what is today in the Northeast, and especially when we are discussing about our neighbors, Myanmar. I'll take it this not very far into the say history, just the Second World War. And I'm sure there is some generation, they might have been children at that time, and especially those who come from Myanmar, they know it very much about it. When the Japanese were invading the Southeast Asia, and the watershed in that was the fall of Singapore, that the Allies forces, especially under the British, that Field Marshal Slim, and the surrender took place, and then the route was such that ultimately it was at Kohima that we could halt the progress of the Japanese. And there was also the Indian National Army, which was fighting alongside the Japanese military. And then of course that went on for about 3 years, like pendulum kept swinging, that they were pushed back and then they again came. And then of course the monsoons, like when Napoleon was fighting the Russians, they had never catered for Field Marshal Winter or the snow. Similarly, I think the Japanese also had never bargained that when they're knocking at the doors at Kohima, that the monsoons and the malaria will take a toll on them. Now what I'm coming on to is that the Myanmar and India and even this is Southeast Asia was under the British rule. So there are many things which I've inherited. The common way of governance, the bureaucracy or the military way of all the countries. And when there was sudden vacuum, say 1947, 48, and more so in the northeast, the seat was at Shillong, and Mizoram itself was just an autonomous district of Assam. Now from there, just in about 70 years, Mizoram itself is a state. I think a great progress which has been made, and as Paul Yanchal has brought out, that they really fought for the peace, I would say. When he gave his own personal example of having suffered in that as a child and also as a student when the insurgency was there. So I would say there was a great sacrifice, and I think the ultimate when he says that the ruling chief minister, for him to vacate, all the elected members vacated their seats for the people who were fighting. That I think was a great sacrifice, and that we are today enjoying the fruits of peace. And now talking of peace, I think the peace is most fundamental for any development, good governance, or whatever we may talk of. And so luckily that foundation is very, very strong as far as Mizoram is concerned, and I'm very sure that in times to come the political landscape, as I understand, will change for a positive. As we are talking with the guests, and having served in the Northeast for quite many years, what is required is here that we should, the human capital is the biggest asset that Northeast has, and now that I'm here, I can say if the national level is here, the human capital of Northeast is here and Mizoram is further high. That is what is required to be tapped, I would say, and good governance and the peace which is there, the development, look east, act east, all these things will unfold. It's going to be a very, very exciting time, I would say, for the students that you will be experiencing another 10 years. Like the Kaladan project which is there, that we will have connectivity, say to Thailand, and thereon you can go to the Singapore, and there the world is open. So I think Singapore will be closer to than Delhi also. So firstly, I'm very happy that such a topic has been chosen for this discussion of the international seminar, and we have very eminent speakers who are here. And so that is all that I had to say, and I wish the organizers and this seminar a grand success, and thank you so much. Kolome.
Thank you, Dr. Mishra, for your inspiring words. May I finally ask Dr. Robin to pose a vote of thanks.
Before I propose a vote of thanks, I want to make an announcement. We will have a short tea break right after this program. It's down the hall, below this hall. And after this inaugural program, we will have technical session opposite to this building, the administrative building, administrative conference hall. So I request all the guests, all the invitees to attend the technical session. We will distribute the conference kit, conference bag, etc. And there will also be lunch at 1:30. Now, Honorable Chief Guest, Professor Lianzela, respected Chair Professor S. Narayan Roy, Dr. Axel, Dr. Misra, Omanut, dear colleagues, distinguished guest invitees, ladies and gentlemen, it's my privilege to propose the vote of thanks at this august gathering. At the very outset, I must thank the Almighty God for giving us a good weather in times of highly unpredictable weather. On behalf of the HRDC and our collaborating partners, Hendrik Bol Stiftung India, Hendrik Bol Stiftung Myanmar, Burma Center Delhi, and Institute of Social Sciences New Delhi, I would like to thank our Honorable Vice Chancellor for gracing the function and also for providing tremendous support. Our university is indeed marching ahead towards progress under his dynamic leadership. Our thanks to the professors and faculties and teachers of Mizoram University who have also given us tremendous moral support. Our sincere gratitude to our guest delegates and speakers who have come from outside India, particularly Lun Win Wei, Koko Lwin, Dr. Kin Zolwin, Nanme Thida, Onmar Nut from Myanmar, and also Dr. Surya Dungal from Nepal. And of course, our distinguished delegates and speakers from different parts of India as well. I must also give thanks to all our invitees, the media, YMA, MZP, MSU, and all individual participants who have attended this function, and without whose participation, the event would not have been successful. Last but not the least, our gratitude also goes to the research scholars, students from Missouri University, and also faculty and staff of Human Resource Development Center, MZU. And before I conclude, I would like to give thanks to all the participants who have gathered and come inside this hall. And once again, I invite you to attend the technical session outside this venue. It will be at the Administrative Conference Hall. Thank you so much.